Hello, my name is Arya Peruma, and today I'll be reviewing the steps in Python programming which I have completed to create this weather predicting software. So as you would see, I'm actually going to be typing in different values for the humidity, and as I type in these different values, the overall scene on my image will change. So essentially, if I typed in 10, there would be a sun there. If I typed in the value 50, there would be partly cloudy kind of image there with a sun and cloud. If I typed in 100, there would be the image with a cloud. And finally, if I typed in something like 200, as you can see, there are a bunch of animated raindrops which are falling. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how I actually made this work and how I actually changed the overall scene of my image as I typed in different values. So along with this start function to initialize my software, my weather predicting software, I've actually included three other functions, which are add heading, add background, and play music, along with another variable here, which is bird sound. So essentially, add heading, add background, and play music are all built-in functions that hold purposes, and this variable of bird sound actually will add sound. So I'm essentially going to be walking you through what the purposes of each function as well as this variable of bird sound does, and the purposes and the uses of this in my software project. So this first function over here is called add heading, and essentially what you do with this is you actually allows you to add a heading to your project. So as you can see, this function is called add heading, and the values I've given for this function are a string of the mountain and a size of 50. So essentially, when you actually display this project, it would show the mountain as the title for this project with a font size of 50. So if I displayed this, as you can see, it says the mountain over here, which is essentially what I've given that string value to. And the second function over here is essentially the add background function, which I have created to add a background. So this string over here is essentially the JPG, the image JPG file that I have added for the background. So essentially it's just this sunset background you see over here in my project, and I've just created this function in order to actually add that background. This third line over here is actually the variable bird sound, and as you can see, I put an equal here and I've assigned this to add sound, the function of add sound, and inside this function of add sound, as you can see, I've given it a string of birds.mp3. And this birds.mp3 is essentially the audio file which I use for the music, which I have muted right now so you can hear me talk. However, music would play normally. And finally, I have this final function over here called play music, and essentially what it does is it initializes this sound of add sound of the birds.mp3 over here, and it just initializes that sound and makes it play, and that's essentially what this play music function does. So now that I've explained what these parts of my code do, let's move on. So now the next thing over here is this humidity equals prompt, and inside it says give me a number for the humidity. So as you can see, there is this variable called humidity, and I've assigned a variable and a prompt as well, which actually says give me a number for the humidity. So this prompt is basically what pops up when I actually display this project. So I can take user input for this humidity. So if I actually displayed this and refresh the page, as you can see, there's this prompt that pops up and it says, give me a number for the humidity. And that's exactly what I've done here for this line of code. I've basically added that to give it some user interaction. So users can actually type in the number for the humidity, making it more user-friendly. So that's exactly what I have done for this humidity equals prompt statement over here. And over here, we have this defined function, which I've defined, which is add raindrop. So essentially, I have defined this add raindrop function, which is what this def over here represents. And I also named it add raindrop. And if you previously saw all those raindrops falling over here, so as you can see, you can actually see all these raindrops falling. And if you actually saw that, this part over here is essentially what I did in order to actually make those raindrops fall. So along with adding this add raindrop function, I've also given it values of x, y, and speed here, as you can see, which I'll actually be using later in these steps over here to actually implement my raindrops and actually make them fall and position them to my liking as well. So I've also created a variable over here, or element, of raindrop. And essentially, all this raindrop element over here does is adds the raindrop image. So if you could actually see over here, these raindrops are actually falling, and with this element of raindrop, I've actually just added that raindrop PNG image so you could actually visually see those raindrops. And I've also given it a size as well. Just as I added a size to my heading, to my text, I also gave the raindrops a size as well. And in this next line here, as you can see, I've actually positioned the element, the raindrop element, which I previously defined and added in my last line of code. So as I positioned these raindrops, as you can see, it says position L, which just means position element. And I've just positioned the element raindrop, which is this over here with the PNG. You can see over here these images of the raindrops. And I've just positioned those to their respective x and y coordinates, so we could make it easier to actually carry out in our following steps over here. And finally, as you can see, there is move y and a bunch of values inside. So the move y function over here actually allows me to control how the raindrops actually fall down on my screen. So I have said raindrop here because that's the element I am referring to, as you can see, and the element I have defined over here in this step. And as you can see, I've written 0 here. So this 0 just represents the x value because I only want vertical movement down for the raindrop. As you can see over here, the raindrops are only moving vertically down, so that's why I've given it an x value of 0. And I've given this a y value of 900, and not only does this represent the y values, but more than the position for the y values, it represents how quickly I want the raindrops to follow down in a vertical y position down the screen. And the larger the number is, the more time it would take for the raindrop to fall. So as you can see right now, I have set it at 900. And as you can see over here, it is falling at a fairly quickly pace. Some are falling slower and some are actually falling a bit quicker here. And essentially, if you actually change this, so I'm just going to show you guys and teach you, if you actually change this value to 100 and save, what actually happens now is it'll ask me for the prompt again, type in the humidity, and as you can see, it's falling at quite a rapid pace here. So before I had it set to 900, that's basically how long it would take to fall down the screen and come back again, and fall down the screen and come back again, and keep on repeating that process. And as the number was a bit larger, it was falling a bit slower. But now that I've changed it to 100, as you can see, it is falling quite rapidly here and quite fastly. So I'm just going to change that back to 900 so we can actually easier see the visual falling of the raindrops. And essentially, now beside this 900, there's this infinite over here. And essentially, this infinite basically represents it is a string of infinite, and it's actually because I want the raindrops to fall an infinite number of times. So if I go ahead and refresh this again and give it 200, as you can see, the raindrops are falling, but then after they've reached the bottom and disappeared from the screen, they're once again repeating and falling all the way from the top again. So this infinite basically tells the code that I want the raindrops to be able to fall, disappear from the screen, and come back an infinite number of times. Because if I didn't write that, what would happen is the raindrops would just fall and never come back again. And that's why I've essentially written this infinite. And I've also given this a Boolean value of false to make sure that the raindrops only go in the downwards direction. Because otherwise, if I do change this to true, the code will think that I actually want this to move up and down. So as you can see here, it is only moving in a downwards position. However, when I change this to true, if I give it a Boolean value of true, what now occurs is this over here. So as you can see, it falls down, and instead of just coming back in a downwards manner again, it goes down and comes back up, which is not usually the behavior of a raindrop. So that's why I have it set to false over here. So basically, when I have it set to false, it means that this step of it going up and down, again, will not occur. So that's why I've given this a Boolean value of false. And finally, as you can see, I have speed over here, and this is when I essentially define the speed over here for my add raindrop function when I add more raindrops. So I have this speed variable over here, this speed value over here as well. So now that we have this covered, let's now talk about our if-else statements, or in this case, our if-elif statements. So for a while, I have been typing in a certain amount of numbers, and a corresponding picture always comes in for those numbers. So now is really the part of code which is going to help you understand why this happens. So as you can see in this first line of our if-else statement, it says that if the humidity is greater than 50 and less than or equal to 100, what actually happens is the image of a cloud, as you can see, there is a variable of cloud over here, an image of a cloud with a size of 100 should be added to our view. So if we input a number, if the user inputs a number that is greater than 50, but less than or equal to the number 100, there will once again be a cloud over here because I've given it this value of cloud, this variable of cloud over here, and I've assigned it to this image PNG, along with this image size of 100. So if I refresh this, remember that I've set it to if the humidity is greater than 50 or less than or equal to 100. So now let's give it a number greater than 50 or less than or equal to 100. So we can say 70, and a cloud should appear. So that's essentially why a cloud appears. So therefore from this, if we do know that if we type in a number between 50 and 100, as I've only said the humidity is greater than 50, 50 is not an included value, we should get a cloud, which I just demonstrated. And now this line here says elif humidity is less than 50. When the humidity is less than 50, I've written over here in this line of code as its corresponding statement that the sun, given a variable of sun, it will add an image of sun.png with a file size of 100. So if the user types in something that is less than 50, a number that is less than 50, what happens is an image of a sun is added with this size. So now, if I give it a value less than 50, we can say 12, and I press OK. As you can see, a sun does appear. And that's essentially the logic behind having that sun there. And now I've said elif humidity is equals 50, which in the Python coding language, equals basically just means equals. That's how you would write equals, because as you can see over here, there is an equals over here, but this is when you assign either a certain variable to something, And when you actually assign a variable to something, for example, this humidity is equal to prompt, that's when you would actually use this single equal sign over here. But when you actually say that something is going to be equal to a value in this case, that's when you actually need to use this operator of equals equals. So now I'm saying elif humidity is equals 50. What actually happens is that an image of a sun will be added with this image file and this size, but an image of a cloud will also be added with this image file and this image size. And now if I actually refresh this, as you can see, when it says when it's equal to 50, there's actually a sun here and it's overlapped by a cloud. So I've actually added both of these images here when the humidity is actually equal to 50. And finally, when the humidity is actually greater than 100, all of these raindrops are going to add. So if you guys saw before, there was a bunch of raindrops actually falling when I displayed this. However, this is actually the line of code which actually allows those raindrops to be implemented on my screen. So as this says, elif humidity is greater than 100, all of these raindrops will add. So as you can see, when the humidity is greater than 100, there is a bunch of raindrops that have added with the add raindrop function, which is this function I kind of called over here in this step. And I've said x, y, speed. So for each raindrop I've added over here, it should all appear with its corresponding x, y, and speed values as defined in the previous lines of code. So as you can see, it says I've defined a function, which is what this def represents. I've defined a function of add raindrop with its corresponding x, y, and speed values. And over here, I've implemented that function, or called that function add raindrop, and put its corresponding x, y, and speed values. So as you can see, we have now the x positions, and then we have the y positions, and y positions are all now set to 0 because if you remember previously, I've actually set it to 900 here. So now in these lines of code, it would be set to 0 because this line of code from here would be implemented in these add raindrop functions here. And essentially, this is the different x values, which is essentially why they all are in different positions, because they all have different x values across my screen. So that's why they're all in different positions over here. The y values, as I mentioned previously, it is all dependent on the speed. So as you can see, I wrote 900 here, and they all would go according to that. So that's why I have set this to 0 over here. And while this is how fast all the raindrops in general will travel down the screen, these speeds over here for each raindrop is kind of the generalized speed for each specific raindrop. So this is for all of them in general, and this is on top of that, the generalized speed for each raindrop. So as you can see, some have a very low speed. One has a speed of 1, one has speed of 2,000, and there is a multitude of different speeds. And I could also add an infinite number of raindrops to this by just adding another add raindrop function with its corresponding x, y, and speed values. And this is why, as you can see, when I demonstrate this and when I actually refresh this, and I give it a value of 200, all of them are at different x positions. They're all falling at different speeds. As you can see, this one's really slow, but some raindrops over here are much, much faster. And that's exactly why all the raindrops are so unique, because of all these individual functions I have added. So with this, I would just like to say thank you so much for listening to this tutoring session on how to use Python, as well as if-else statements in order to create your own weather predicting software. I hope you enjoyed and was able to learn something new. Once again, my name is Arya Peruma, and I hope to see you in another coding session.